You're watching the chapter number 2 of the Blender Materials, Textures and Nodes course, Fundamentals of Shaders. In today's chapter, we'll first understand about these 4 shader types, and then we'll also understand about their practical usage in the retro gaming arcade scene that we started creating in the first chapter of this course. And yes, if you're someone who is new to this course, then you can watch the chapter number 1 of this course by using the link of the playlist given in the pinned comment. So I've opened this file that we created in the last chapter to understand about the different type of shaders. We first understood about the principal BSDF node and used it to create a brushed aluminium material. But now it's the time to move to the first topic of this chapter, which is the Glossy BSDF node. To understand about it, we first need to create a new material. So in the shader editor, first of all, click on this cross icon to remove the brushed aluminium material from the UV sphere. Now click on the new button to create a new material, and now to add the Glossy BSDF node, press Shift plus A in the shader editor, then go to the shader category and select the Glossy BSDF. Now left click to place it over here, and right now it is not connected to the material output, and as a result it's not yet applied to the UV sphere. So to connect it to the material output node, we'll first remove this principal BSDF node. So left click to select it and press X to delete. After this, to connect the Glossy BSDF node to the material output, we have to connect this BSDF socket to the surface socket in the material output. So for this, left click on the BSDF socket and drag your cursor to connect it to the surface socket in the material output. And by doing this, we are now having the Glossy BSDF material applied to the UV sphere. Now this Glossy BSDF is used to add reflections on your material. You can use this shader node while creating materials like metals and mirrors, and in this node you also have options like the color, using which you can control the color of this glossy material. Similarly, we also have other options like the roughness value, which by default is set at 0.5, but if I try to reduce it, then the sharpness of the reflection on the surface of the material will begin to increase. At a value of 0, the reflections will be perfectly sharp, and at a value of roughness equal to 1, we are not able to see any reflections on the surface since it has now turned into a smooth material. So ideally, for a metallic surface, it's advisable to keep the roughness value at around 0.4 or 0.3 depending upon which particular metal you are trying to create. Similarly, the next option that we have is the anisotropy, and as we learned in the last chapter, you can use it to create the stretching effect of the reflections along the surface of the material. So if I begin to increase this value of anisotropy, then you will notice the stretching effect of the reflection, and by using the rotation value, you can change the rotation of these anisotropic reflections. So whenever you want to create the stretching effect of reflections on the object's material, then try to change the value of the anisotropy and the rotation until you get a perfect result. So now we have created this material with the help of the Glossy BSDF, and so now we'll save this newly created material in our material library that we created in the last chapter. Also, if you wish to download this complete Blender file with all the materials that we create in the upcoming chapters of this course, then you can consider joining the Patreon of this channel, whose link is available in the description of this video. Now to save this material, I'll go to the shader editor, and first we'll rename it from material to glossy, and to indicate the color, I'll also type red. So now the material name is glossy red. After this, to save this material, go to the scene collection, and in this sphere drop down, we have this option to select the glossy red material that we have just created. So I'll select it, then right click and click on mark as asset. And yes, if you want to learn about creating your own material library in Blender, then watch the chapter number 1 of this series where we understood about it in complete detail. Now to view the material library, I'll change this window from the shader editor to the asset browser. Now click on the refresh button, and now here we have the brushed aluminium material that we created in the last chapter and this glossy red material that we created in today's chapter. And after this, let's now move to the next topic of this chapter, which is understanding about the Diffuse BSDF node. So first of all, I'll change this window from the asset browser to the shader editor, and after this, to create a new material, I'll select the UV sphere, click on the cross icon to remove the glossy red material, and then click on the new button. Also, if it ever happens that you wish to add any material that you previously used in that file to any object in the scene, then you can click on this icon, and here you will get the list of all the materials which are used till now. So in the shader editor, we are having this principal BSDF node, but in order to understand about the diffuse BSDF node, I'll press Shift plus A, then go to shader and select the diffuse BSDF. Left click to place it over here. Now to connect the diffuse BSDF node to the material output, I'll take this BSDF socket, which is the output, and connect it to the surface socket in the material output. By doing this, the principal BSDF node will automatically get disconnected, and I left click to select it and press X to delete. Now the material applied on the UV sphere because of the diffuse BSDF node might look very similar to the one applied by the principal BSDF. And to understand why it happens, we need to understand the difference between the glossy BSDF node that we just understood and this one. As a result, in the shader editor, let's also add the glossy BSDF node. Now if I connect the glossy BSDF node to the material output, then we used to have this material with some reflections, and this was used to create metallic materials. Just the opposite opposite of this is performed by the diffuse BSDF. It is used to create materials for non-metallic surfaces. As you can see, even at a roughness value of 0, we are not able to see any reflections on this material surface. And as you all know, metals are the ones which reflect light, and the effect of lighting also changes the way the metallic materials look. But just the opposite is the case with non-metallic materials. They do not reflect the light in the same way as metals do, and as a result, any change in the lighting of the scene does not influence the way how the material will look in our scene. So in Blender, whenever you have to create metallic materials, then you should be selecting the Glossy BSDF node because it will give you the reflections, and whenever you have to create non-metallic materials, then you should go for Diffuse BSDF node due to the lack of reflections. Now in this node, we also have option to control the color of the material. For example, if I select the blue color, then the color of the material will change to blue. Then over here, we have the roughness value, which by default is set at 0, but despite having such a low value of roughness, we are not able to see much reflections on this material. In fact, even if I try to increase this value of roughness, you won't notice much difference in the material. Now moving ahead, the next topic for this chapter is understanding about the transparent BSDF node. So first of all, I've selected both of these nodes and will delete them by pressing X. Now in the shader editor, press Shift plus A, then go to shader, and now we'll add the transparent BSDF node. Let's place it over here and connect the BSDF socket to the surface socket in the material output. Now as the name suggests, it is used to create transparency, and that too without any refraction. As a result, we get a completely transparent material, and it looks as if there is actually no material added over here. In fact, if I deselect the UV sphere, then now the material is completely transparent, and this is because of the lack of refraction. If you remember, in the last chapter when we were learning about the principal BSDF node, I told you that by using the transmission value, you can create a material which looks like glass. So for now, if I take the BSDF socket and connect it to the material output, and in the transmission enter the value equal to 1, then you can clearly notice the difference between the kind of transparent material that we are getting in case of the principal BSDF node and the transparent BSDF. The one that is created because of the principal BSDF node looks a lot more realistic as compared to the transparent BSDF node. And as I told you before, this is happening because of the refraction of light, and this refraction can be controlled in the principal BSDF node with the help of this IOR value. For air, this value is equal to 1, and at this value, we'll get a material which is completely transparent, just like the one that we got by using the transparent BSDF node. But in real world, transparent objects like glass, water have the value of IOR greater than 1, that is around 1.3 or 1.4, and this gives them a realistic transparent appearance. Now coming back to the transparent BSDF node, we also have the option to control the color, and by using this option, I can set any particular color for the transparent material. And after this, let's now move to the last topic of this chapter, which is translucent BSDF node. So to understand it, I'll first remove the principal BSDF and the transparent nodes from the shader editor. So press X to delete. Now press Shift plus A, then go to shader and select the translucent BSDF. Let's place it over here and connect it to the surface socket in the material output. Now you must be knowing that there's a category of objects known as translucent objects, and the special thing about them is that they allow some of the light to pass through them. They are different from the transparent objects, which basically allow all the light to pass through them, and they're also different from the opaque objects like table, chair, which do not allow any light to pass through them. So again, in case of translucent objects, we'll be able to see some amount of light passing through them. To understand about this in more detail, I'll go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad. Now select this light, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, and we'll place it at the back of the UV sphere. Now in the color, I'll change this to the red color, and in the power, let's increase this to 1500 watts. Now press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view, and if I zoom in, then you will notice that even though the color of this material is white, but we are still able to see a slight amount of red light passing through its surface. Now if I go to the shader editor and add the principal BSDF node and connect it to the material output, then in this case, the material which is produced is not allowing any red light to pass through its surface. And basically this is the thing which is unique in the translucent BSDF. Now in this node, you also have the option to control the color of the surface on which the material is applied. And after this, we have now learnt about the 4 shaders, namely Glossy BSDF, Diffuse BSDF, Transparent and Translucent BSDF. And now it's the time to use some of these shaders in this retro gaming arcade scene that we started creating in the last chapter. So I've opened this scene where we created this arcade machine and even applied some very simple materials to it. And to continue with the scene, we'll be applying the glossy red material to these side faces. But for doing this, we need to open the asset browser. So first of all, I'll expand this timeline editor and change this window to the asset browser. Now from here, I'll change the asset library from all to materials, and to use the glossy red material on some specific faces of the machine, we first need to create a new slot for material in the material properties. So click on the plus icon, then go to the material library, left click on the glossy red material, then we'll drag and drop it on this empty slot in the material properties. After this slot will now have the glossy red material added to it. Now to assign this material to some specific faces, press tab to enter the edit mode. Now with the shift key hold it, select these three faces on the left side, and similarly let's also select the three faces on the other side. So with the shift key hold it, select these three faces also, and after this in the material properties, select the glossy red material and click on the assign button. Now return back to the object mode, let's change the angle, and now this is how the glossy material is looking on the machine. If you want, you can change this window to the shader editor. Let's zoom in by using the scroll wheel, and you can change the color by using the color option from here, or the roughness value if you want to change the amount of reflections. But for now, I'll keep the color as red, and in the roughness I've entered a value of around 0.6. and yes, if I reduce the value of anisotropy down to 0, then in this case we'll be having a lighter shade of red. After this, I'll also bring down the roughness value down to 0.4 or 0.3, and now it looks perfect. Moving ahead, let's also create a transparent face for this bottom part of the arcade machine, and for this go to the material properties, click on the plus icon to create the slot for a new material, then click on the new button, then in the shader editor press shift plus A, then go to shader, and we'll use the transparent BSDF node. So let's place it over here, connect the BSDF socket to the surface in the material output, and to assign this material to the bottom face, press tab to enter the edit mode. Let's also go to the solid mode. Now select this face, and let's also apply the inset tool by pressing I and left click. Now I'll select this material with the transparent BSDF node and click on the assign button. Now return back to the object mode, go to the rendered preview mode, and if I change the angle, then you can see that this particular face is now completely transparent. As a result, we are able to see through this particular face. Also, to see the effect of this yellow emission material that we created in the last chapter, click here and turn on the scene lights and the scene world. Now to make the emission material look realistic, we'll do a few changes in the solid mode. So first of all, press tab to enter the edit mode, and now we'll be selecting these boundary faces surrounding the ones with the glossy material, and then we'll apply this yellow emission material to them. By doing this, we'll be able to create a nice glowing effect for the arcade gaming machine. But to do this thing, let's first go to the modifier properties, and we'll disable the real-time display of the bevel modifier by clicking on this icon. Now to select this face loop on the boundary, simply hold on the Alt button and then left click on this edge. Then for the next one, with both the Alt and the Shift key holded, left click on this edge. Then for this bottom part also, I'll hold the Shift and the Alt button and left click here. After this, let's move to the other side, and with the Shift and Alt key holded, select this face loop, then select this one, and at last, let's also select this face loop. Now go to the material properties, select the emission material and click on the assign button. After this, go to the rendered preview mode, and now we are able to see the lighting effect in these inner boundaries of the faces in a much better way. If you want, you can go to the emission strength and try to increase it or decrease it depending upon the object and the lighting in your scene. And also, you can try to change the emission color to something else like green or blue or red, but for now, I will choose the yellow color for the emission. Also, I'll turn off the scene lights and the scene world in the viewport shading menu. And with this, we have now arrived to the end of the chapter number 2. Today we learned about some new type of shaders, some new concepts, and then we also tried to use them in this project of the retro gaming arcade machine. Before ending, let me also enable the real-time display of the bevel modifier for this gaming machine. And yes, if you wish to download this Blender file with the entire scene of the retro gaming arcade completely ready, then you can join the Patreon of this channel by using the link in the description of this video. And so our next chapter will be the chapter number 3, understanding the volume shaders. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, press that notification bell so that you can get timely updates about the upcoming chapters. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.